as an example, naming our company on it. Here's how you conduct yourself in an SCPA investigation situation. So, you know, in a way, you're retaining your long-term reputation and brand. But to do that, you've got to recognize the mistakes you make along the way. And we make them every day. But there should be a system of buy-in to the culture that helps root that out quickly.
We've got a few minutes left, and I want to make sure we have room for one or two questions from the audience before we wrap up. Anybody want to do that? Yeah.
So, the three of you have very positive experiences, and it sounds like you've been put into positions where you can influence these places of where you work. What if you're, you know, not the boss, you're not the CEO, and you're in a really toxic environment? You know, how do you handle that with grace? How do you do the right thing when everything around you is really toxic?
So, I would say, from my own experience, when I look back, that my judgment of the degree of toxicity of when I was younger and when I was older would have been different. And so when I'm younger, I'd probably have a lot of humility and say, because there's toxicity that is illegal, right? Clearly illegal and wrong. And then there's a spectrum. And I think it's, particularly those of us who hang around the world of the church and faith, we can want some certainty that's based on rules. I'm just going to speak for myself. When I look back at the things that bothered me when I was younger, and now I have a little more experience, I'm glad that I didn't wave a big flag, because I see now the spectrum, and I don't think I've lost any sense of absolute line. And so I think I'd first try to decide, is it toxic in the sense it's unpleasant for me, I don't like it, or is it just wrong? And there's those are two really different things. And the first, you can learn a lot and gain a lot, and I wouldn't necessarily think about bailing. I was a single mother for 18 years, and I had to put food on our table. I mean, and that was a huge motivator to me, and so I'm glad for competition, because the guy next to me doing a better job helped me do a better job, and it made sure that we kept having food to eat. And there were some really unpleasant things in there. And in the investment world, do you think that investors only invest because they think they can make a return? You think that's what happens? It's not what happens all the time. Sometimes you invest because you need to get that fund you've raised fully invested so you can raise the next fund so you can get another layer of management fees. Is that wrong? It's not illegal. I mean, theoretically, it's not what should happen, right? But life is kind of fuzzy and messy. And so I'm really glad I didn't scream about that and just kind of went along with it, because I actually saw that velocity of capital is important. So having capital, this next fund, to invest it, helped us. So even if that last investment, in those days, we could price investments at 40%, just telling you how the world's changed. Now that same investment would probably be priced at 12%. So if that last investment, we priced it instead of at 40% at 22%, it's not our standard, but is it wrong? The answer is no, it's not wrong. And there's some business judgment there that as a young person, I just needed to learn from, but it was uncomfortable for me. And probably at that age, I might have even used, just as you're saying, toxic, because it didn't meet my ideal. So I'm just offering that toxic can change in definition, and I would be slow to make absolute judgments.
Take the second scenario, though, that you described, where it is bad, wrong, illegal, criminal, whatever.
Yeah.
And actually, my corollary to that question, because I want to ask, is you talked about the good things. I'm curious if any of you could take yourself to sort of one of those darker times and how you got through. What did you do and how did your faith help you? How did you get through that tough time when maybe you were in a toxic situation that was bad for you or the situation? And maybe reflect personally on how you made it through that situation.
So if I could, I want you to, if you have a chance to get the Bible and read Psalm 37, it's the perfect example of how, as an individual, you will be pressed down. You will be put against those that want to do evil to you, who will spread rumors and attack you and do whatever it is they can imagine to try to eradicate you, your position, or anything you're doing at that place. We have all worked in environments like that, where we've been put at odds with an organization. It's not a comfortable feeling. The great news about it is that God stands by you. If you take the position that this is me, this is who I am, and if all of you believe that you want to get me out of here, my favorite thing is, okay. And I had a wonderful circumstance like that where I left the company, and the Lord blessed me unbelievably afterwards because I took a stand for righteousness. And I am a firm believer, after finishing reading David's Psalm, that that's going to be a reward for you. If you decide in a toxic environment, and again, if this is truly evil behavior and corrupt behavior, etc., not the things that necessarily could be, viewed a little bit differently, but clearly, obviously wrong, and make yourself known. Why is it wrong? What is it you believe? Stand strong, and then look for, where do I go? Because the consequences may come to you that you may be extracted from that company. That may happen, but I'm telling you, it may be the best thing that ever happened in your life, that you got yourself out of that environment and moved to someplace else where your righteousness would be supported and looked upon positively. So I really do believe that's the one, 37 is the one I've always hung my hat on, because I've gone through those very dark, very challenging times. And God's always stood by me, and it's the evil and those that, the famous picture of is they're aiming their bow at me. And the great news is that God moves that bow so that the arrow hits them. It's my favorite picture, mental picture of those that would do harm.
It's a great question, and, for students particularly, I think you have to make judgments on what you hold onto tightly and what you hold onto loosely. And you very well may be in a position where that perfect job that you got right out of school, it ends up being a train wreck. And asking yourself, well, am I willing to hold on to that loosely? Because I'm convinced that I've got a calling on my life, that the Lord's going to affirm the work of my hands, that He's got a purpose for me, that I don't know always the map from A to B to the total end, but I know maybe the next step is a train wreck. But I've got enough trust in Him and who He's called me to be, that He's going to provide for me. And I've got this great advantage of being gifted in a very unique, particular way, and that gifting being accompanied by a calling on my life. And even though I couldn't have the visibility for it, I believe that He loves me enough to take care of me. And so I'm going to hold on to it loosely. And, I laugh at myself because when everyone was interviewing my friends for jobs, I'm in my pajamas and bowed down because I'm working for my dad. Even in that context, of family context, and Leah can affirm that, there were 2 or 3 times we had to say, hey, is it time for us to leave? Is it time for us to stop? And it wasn't because it would be great. It would be an exit that would be difficult and hard. But we were determined to hold on to that part of our life loosely enough that if it was required of us, we could still trust the Lord and just move on. So I'd encourage the students that is a reality of who you are in Christ.
One more question.
I think most people and our leaders and politicians would agree that there's increasing income inequality and class inequality and injustice. And anytime you have competition, there's winners and there's also losers. And maybe that's increasing the gap between the classes. But how would you as Christians come to rectify that increasing inequality between the groups or the society classes?
Well, if any of us had the answer, we'd probably be the next president.
Yeah, right.
One thing I'd do is contextualize that question, and I'd say that we're having an experience in America and in the West. It's an experience of that. I wouldn't deny it. If you look at the whole world,
Can you speak up a little bit?
yeah,
Okay, thank you.
our experience in the US and in the West is one thing. If you look at the whole world, it's a different set of dynamics. And there's a lot of our population has come up in income levels, huge percentage, relative to the last 20, 30 years. So the question is, what are we looking at? Are we looking at percentiles in the United States or in the Western economies? Are we looking at the whole world? And I guess I just look at the competitive world and look at everybody who's going to be coming out of India and China, and I say our country had better be serious, because we're all going to have trouble if we don't hang together and move forward. And, you know, it comes down to education. I don't have an answer, but I think